Hello and good morning, evening or afternoon, depending on when you are watching this latest episode of Susty Talk from Edie. These are our series of video interviews first launched in 2020 to keep us all feeling a bit more connected and empowered in sustainability during COVID. And with lockdown restrictions having lifted in the UK, the conversation is still far from over and we are continuing our series. And I'm delighted to have on our call today Jennie Colville from Landsec, who is the business's head of ESG and sustainability. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Jennie. How are you doing?
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm privileged to be here and chat to you today, so thank you.
No, thank you for coming on. I remember there was a time where, Edie would probably be interviewing Landsec every few weeks, or at least meeting every few weeks, and I know that there's been a bit of change at the business in terms of ESG and sustainability recently. So it's great to have you on for, I think this is your first video interview with us since being appointed in this role, right?
It is indeed. And yes, there has been a lot of change. I think in general, there's been a lot of change within the sustainability market and continues to be a lot of change with, I think the sustainability agenda has definitely risen up the corporate agenda. So yeah, there has been a lot of change within Landsec, but also within the wider sustainability market.
Of course, I feel like, a lot of our contacts have changed jobs and there's been so many features done on, the talent search in this industry and where the industry's going. So a super exciting time in that respect. And Jennie, obviously we've been introduced to each other, but the listeners might not have been. So it'd be great to start with an introduction to yourself and to your role at Landsec. I'm particularly interested in that job title, sustainability and ESG, which a few businesses are bringing in.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much. I'm sort of in the privileged position that I have forged a career in an area that I've been really passionate about. And so it was a privilege to join Landsec back in March last year. But I've always been passionate about or interested or fascinated in the role that humans play on our planet, and also, but most importantly, about the role that humans play on our planet, but also how we have the tools and the technology and skills to minimize the negative impact on our planet. I remember when the Montreal Protocol came out, and this is showing my age, but back in 1987, I remember when that protocol came out, which was an international treaty about how we could try and reduce the hole in the ozone layer. And what I was fascinated by, firstly, that humans could have such an impact on such, the ozone layer, which protects our planet from UV radiation. But also what I was fascinated about is how through that international collaboration, through the Montreal Protocol, we've been able to reduce the hole. And I know that the ozone layer is predicted to be back intact by the middle of the century. So since that early age, as I say, I've been really passionate in all things sustainability. So I've got 20 years experience in the sustainability sector. I have moved around different industries. I've been in the legal sector, in insurance, I've been in local authority level, and now I'm in the real estate industry. And I think taking on the job as head of ESG and sustainability in Landsec, in a real estate company, again, what I really liked about the role is that as we are an owner and developer of physical assets, buildings, shopping centres, residential areas, we can really have a direct impact on the emissions that we're producing, and we can have a direct impact within the communities that we serve and what the types of places that we're creating, places that make sure that everyone can feel as if they belong. So it's been an interesting career, but really, really pleased, as I say, to be at Landsec where we can have that direct impact. I think the phrasing around ESG and sustainability, I think all businesses are grappling with the plethora of terms out there for what we mean by being a sustainable business. There's purpose-led organizations, there's corporate responsibility, there's ESG. For us at Landsec, what we mean by being a sustainable business is a business that creates value for both our shareholders and society alike. And it's that balancing act about making money. Of course, we're a business, we need to give our shareholders a fair return, but we need to make that money without harming the environment, with making sure that we're supporting our communities to thrive and bringing all our people along that journey. So that's what we mean by sustainable business. The ESG part of that Those are the 3 pillars that underpin sustainability. They're the risks, the different lenses that you look through to understand what are the environment, social and governance risks and opportunities relevant for our business and the ones that we should be addressing and influencing. So I see sustainability as that umbrella, and the ESG as the different lenses that we look at the risks and opportunities that are relevant to a business or their stakeholders.
That makes sense. And then in today's call, we'll put some time aside to look at some of the most material ESG efforts that you've talked about people and planet for Landsec. But I feel like I do want to touch a little bit on that governance part, as Landsec is a company that we're familiar with, that we've interviewed many times over the years about environmental sustainability, and yeah, a lot has been said about good governance as well. And you've mentioned the need to balance this and to go in and act regardless of what language a business chooses to use. So I'd love to hear about you and the other members of your team work with teams like the C-suite and the finance team to make sure you're getting that balance right, to make sure that you have a strategy and a culture that makes sure that the balance keeps being upheld.
Yeah, so I think my view is that to be a successful, sustainable business, you need 3 things. You need data, you need senior management support, and you need communication. And the role, therefore, of my team, the sustainability team, is to do those things. We recommend to our executive committee, who include our C-suite, what are the ESG risks and opportunities that we need to be responding to and influencing. What is our approach to sustainability? The other role that my team plays is then delivering on some company-wide programs on how we can address some of those material environmental, social and governance issues. So, for example, making sure that all our assets are operating in an environmentally sound way. In accordance, we operate our assets in accordance with ISO 14001 and ISO 50001. The third element of my team's role is then to be that internal consultant, to be that corporate conscience, that the challenger, to be able to work with all different functions, all different portfolios, making sure that every business decision we consider people, planet and profit. I think in terms of the governance of sustainability at Landsec, and this year we've actually strengthened our governance. We launched a new sustainability strategy in April of this year, and as a result of that, our executive committee, who includes our C-suite members, they are accountable for making sure that we deliver on our sustainability vision and commitments. Sitting underneath that is a senior management forum, our sustainability forum, senior manager people that ensure that we put the right people in place, deliver the right actions to ensure that we deliver that commitments. They are responsible for delivering the actions that enable us to deliver that sustainability vision. The other thing that we've done, which has really driven engagement across Landsec, is that this is the second year that we've had a proportion of our bonus linked to us achieving our energy and carbon targets. And also with the launch of our strategy, we are encouraging all our colleagues to have an objective within their performance plan for the year to demonstrate how they can support our sustainability vision and commitments. And what we've seen with that, having it linked to bonus and making sure that everyone is starting to think, what is my role in being a sustainable business? What can I do? We've seen real engagement within our employee base. So many teams, finance, procurement, our office portfolio have been coming to us as a sustainability team to say, what can we do? What can my objective be? How can we support us achieving those energy and carbon targets so that we get our bonus? So I think that's really driven clear engagement across the business, further embedding sustainability into everything that we do.
Yeah, I love what you said about the sustainability team starting out as being corporate conscience. And then in doing this, it means that everyone has a little bit of that conscience and thinks about it every day. As you mentioned, yeah, it's a great time to be talking shortly after the launch of the new sustainability strategy, the title of which is Build Well, Live Well, Act Well. And I understand that the Act Well part is the G in ESG, the governance, and we've talked about that, but it'd be great to hear about some of the key updates in regards to build well and live well, so the E and S in ESG, and why you think that now was the right time to update this strategy? So in 2022, coming out of lockdown here in the UK.
Well, I think a lot of companies are looking at their approach to sustainability just because we're all recovering from the pandemic, and to make sure that our approach to sustainability is still relevant in the world that we're living in. And the pandemic has changed the way that we live and work. So are we addressing the most material, are we still addressing the most material ESG issues? So it was last year, not only because we were recovering from the pandemic did we decide to review our strategy, but also our CEO, Mark Allen, started in March 2020. And with that, he refreshed our purpose and he set out a new corporate strategy. So both those two things led us to make sure that our approach to sustainability was still relevant. So we kicked off a program of work last year. We engaged with various stakeholders, investors, customers, community groups to understand from them what were those global challenges that were relevant to us as a real estate company and that they wanted us to control and influence. And that's led us to our Build Well, Live Well, Act Well framework, which, as you said, we launched earlier this year. I think what is great about the framework is that it simplifies sustainability. So something we were really keen for the framework to do was to make sure, A, it focused our actions on the relevant issues. Sometimes I think us as businesses or even as sustainability teams, we try to do everything and we try to focus on lots of different things and never do anything really well. So what we wanted our framework to do was make sure we focus our actions on where we knew we could have the biggest impact. And also another thing we really wanted to ensure that we did was sustainability is sometimes considered quite technical, confusing. People are not sure how to talk about carbon footprint or carbon emissions. So we wanted to make the framework easy to communicate, easy to understand for all of us, and then easy to communicate so that each and every one of us at Landsec can speak to our office occupiers or our brand partners that are in our shopping centres about our approach. And I think we've achieved that with the framework. It's simple and it's memorable and it's easy to understand. We've mentioned the governance side, which is covered by the Act Well, but the Build Well, our key commitment is to make sure that when we are designing and developing buildings and managing our buildings, we're enhancing the health of the environment. And our focus areas within Build Well is about reducing operational carbon emissions. And we've got our science-based target to make sure we achieve that. And the other big thing that we're focusing on is reducing embodied carbon emissions. So those are the emissions that are generated when we construct our buildings. Within Live Well, our focus area on this, within that commitment is about how can we support. We have assets within various different communities across the UK. How can we support those communities to thrive? Because if those communities aren't thriving, we wouldn't have shoppers coming to our shopping centres. We wouldn't have businesses wanting to occupy space in our office buildings. So within Live Well, our focus is on enhancing social mobility within the real estate industry. And we're doing that by supporting 30,000 people towards the world of work by 2030, which will generate around £200 million of social value by 2030.
Great, thank you for the overview. And as you mentioned, it's a really sweeping strategy, even though it is designed to be easy to understand. There's a lot covered. At edie, we tend to focus on environmental sustainability. So something that grabbed me was the bits that were included about having a positive impact on the environment, and specifically really going further and faster on emissions. I feel like we've talked to the business before about science-based target setting. So I did want to focus in on the embodied carbon emissions that you mentioned. And it seems to be a moment for the business in this regard. I've been following the development of the Forge at London Bankside, which is meant to be the business's first net zero carbon building in life cycle. And I know that Landsec's not the only business looking at the World Green Building Council and UK Green Building Council as well really seem to be at a moment in which, there's now this focus on embodied emissions. So sort of it's easy enough to measure operational emissions. The technologies to address them are coming down in cost and becoming more popular, but embodied emissions still seem a bit more less demystified in a way, and as you mentioned, carbon can be full of jargon. So it would be great to hear about how in practice a business can reduce embodied emissions and how that's being done at the Forge as a case study.
Fantastic. I suppose just to start, to maybe for some listeners that might not understand what embodied carbon is, and it was actually a term that I haven't come across frequently within my career, because it's very much focused within real estate and buildings. But embodied carbon are the emissions that are produced from the construction of a building, from the material, from all the emissions that are produced for the manufacture of the raw materials, from the transport and delivery of those raw materials to site, and then to the actual construction of the building. So it is 50% of a building's carbon emissions are produced during the construction of the building, and that proportion is increasing as the grid decarbonizes. So as our operational emissions come down, that proportion is increasing. So we're really delighted that we have got a focus of reducing embodied carbon. We've set a target to ensure that by 2030, the buildings that we develop have 50% less embodied carbon than a typical building. So it's a stretching target, but one which we're committed to achieving. For the Forge, as you say, what are the practical actions that we've taken at the Forge to ensure that we've reduced embodied carbon? And at the Forge, we've actually reduced embodied carbon by 25% from the design stage. And how we've done that is a few things, but one of the key things that we've done is used a real pioneering scheme called Design for Manufacture and Assembly, or PDFMA for short. And what this approach to construction is all about is actually a methodology that's frequently used within the manufacturing sector. But what this approach to construction is all about is a set of standardized components are manufactured off-site and then brought to site to be assembled. And the benefits of the PDFMA approach to construction is that you're using less materials. With the standardized kit of parts, as you call it, you've got the same specification of materials being used within the construction of the building. So it uses less materials. There's less waste because materials are brought onto site. They don't have to be cut to size to fit a door frame or a space. So less waste is produced. You're also able to construct the building quicker because each of the floors use the same methodology for constructing that floor. So you're able to construct the building quicker, therefore reducing costs. So the whole ethos of the Forge is around building lean, building quicker, building greener, and building safer. That's one. So using PDFMA has really had significant environmental benefits. It's also enabled, I said it, that method ensures that we use less materials. So it's enabled us to reduce the amount of concrete we've used on site by 13%. It's reduced the amount of steel we've used on site by 18%. And also the fact that you're bringing less materials onto site means you've got less emissions from the transport and delivery of those materials. I think the other thing that we've done, the other thing we've done at the Forge is also not only are we using less materials, but we're also working with our supply chain to have more low carbon materials used on the site. So, for example, the concrete that we've used, which we've used less concrete, but 40% of that concrete has recycled aggregates in it. So it's less carbon intensive than standard concrete.
Great, thank you for that. And then obviously this is all great, but as you mentioned, the benefits of this can be multiplied across other buildings. New building standards are coming in for housing in 2025, for commercial buildings to different timelines. And as you mentioned, it'd be even more efficient to manufacture these things off-site, not just for the Forge, but for other projects as well. And we've mentioned the importance of collaboration and how things like embodied carbon defining and measuring really is specific for the building sector, and there's a need for collaboration here. So it'd be great to finish with a note on how Landsec is collaborating to share learnings on net zero buildings and some of the other things included in Build Well, Live Well, Act Well. And I know that on the Forge specifically for embodied carbon, specifically that the UK government's been involved through UKRI, UKGBC has been involved, and then of course all the other stakeholders you'd expect for the supply chain of a major project like that, so architects, suppliers, local authorities.
I think the collaboration point is key, and one thing that I believe and we believe at Landsec is that there can be no losers to this race to net zero. We've all got to win together. So collaboration and advocacy of new methods of construction, of sustainable materials is absolutely critical to making sure that we achieve our UK target to be net zero by 2050. Just following on from the Forge, as you mentioned, UK R&I have been involved, and we've been sharing, because we've had funding from UK R&I, we've been sharing the lessons learned from using the PDFMA method of construction with them and with our wider peer industries. Because if we were to use this method on hospitals, schools, prisons, that are pretty standardized in their design, it can really reduce the materials that we use. It can really reduce the time to construct these. So we're really making sure that we're sharing the lessons from the Forge with the wider industry through UK R&I or through UK GBC or the British Property Federation, all the other industry membership bodies. We're making sure that we're sharing those learnings. But I think there's also the other way where Landsec can collaborate and other organisations can collaborate is through customers and suppliers. And a big program of work that we have been delivering is working with our office customers over the past year. 40% of our carbon emissions come from the energy used by our office occupiers, and therefore we've been working with them to, and most of our office occupiers are small and medium businesses with their own sustainability journeys, but we've been working with them to go and do a site audit within their demise to understand how they're using energy, what policies and procedures they have in place, and then recommending to them, working with them, recommending to them ways in which they can reduce their energy consumption, which not only helps them to reduce their energy bills, but helps them to achieve their energy and carbon reduction targets. So there's more that we can do around working with our brand partners within our shopping centres around that, and we need to look, and we're looking at how we can do that. And then it's the supply chain, as you've already mentioned. It's how we can work with our supply chain, understand, I mean, most of our suppliers and partners have innovative solutions already in place. How can we work with them and for them to we can trial some of those innovative solutions on our assets? And just a prime example of that is we've been working in our head office here in 80 to 100 Victoria Street. We're trialling artificial intelligence to enable the AI to understand how the building is occupied and therefore drive our building management systems to operate the building in line with the way the building's occupied. And that's seen some significant result savings in energy consumption just from the short trial that we've been having.
Great, well, thank you so much for that. I feel like, yeah, at this moment in time, we have a lot of people asking for specific case studies as well. Some people might just be understanding what embodied carbon is or what net zero means, but for a lot of businesses we have that hunger for, well, how can it be done? Can it be done, and what does it look like? So thank you very much for giving us some insight into these great case studies from Landsec. I'm aware we are out of time for our call today, so yeah, all that remains is to thank you once again for joining the Susty Talk, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me.